One of Cronenberg's most successful movies to date, The Fly follows Seth Brundle, played by Jeff Goldblum, who invents a teleporting device. Although, whilst testing it, a fly makes its way into the capsule with disastrous results for Seth. As with his previous efforts, it would be no different for Cronenberg to tackle issues surrounding the human body and its associated anxieties. It might be simply considered a monster horror film with spectacular special effects, and it indeed can be read that way, but Cronenberg digs deeper, explores our fear of our mortality as well as supplying a heartbreaking love story at its core. With this element of storytelling at the forefront of the narrative, it makes Seth relatable for the most part. The audience genuinely cares about his plight and can easily empathise with his changing body. The chemistry on screen is greatly enhanced due to the fact that Jeff Goldblum and Geena Davis were a couple in real life, making the performances and scenes of drama that much more impactful. As the movie was released in 1986 and AIDS was rampant, it was at the forefront of the minds of audiences and critics alike. As such, the transformation and bodily decay of Seth could be seen as allegorical of the AIDS crisis, tapping into very public fears of infection and bodily deterioration. Although similarities to the AIDS crisis is palpable and one that is rather potent, Cronenberg himself does not agree with this theory for several reasons. His main counter-argument being that Veronica, Geena Davis's character, gives it to him due to Seth's virginity. To Cronenberg, this disrupts a fundamental aspect of the narrative, that being the love story. If this AIDS aspect was in fact true, it would certainly add a cynical facet to the relationship. Proving himself an active auteur, Cronenberg dismisses the AIDS symbolism and discusses the intention of Seth's deterioration. The AIDS connection is very superficial. I see it as talking about mortality, about our vulnerability, and the tragedy of human loss. AIDS is tragic, but beyond it all, I'm digging deeper. We've all got the disease of being finite, and the consciousness is the original sin, consciousness of the inevitability of our death. Although Cronenberg disagrees with it for various reasons, particularly for character and narrative reasoning, the presence of AIDS in the theatrical release of The Fly is incredibly relevant. Its presence enhances the fear experienced by the audience, the presentation of a body-altering condition making the horror even more potent. This fear is reminiscent of a poster seen briefly in Shivers. On this particular poster it reads, "Sex is the invention of a clever venereal disease." Although quite a humorous statement, it does in fact ring true for part of the success of The Fly. Cronenberg himself claims that the social climate and fear surrounding the AIDS crisis helped with the success of his film. With that being said, with common interpretations and readings of the film being linked with the AIDS crisis, it could be said that sex is in fact the clever invention of a venereal disease, sex being allegorical of AIDS, whilst the disease, the true terror, being that of our own mortality in aging bodies under the guise of a topical crisis in 80s culture. Cronenberg's next film discusses the body in rather unexpected and some would say far more mature ways than his previous works. That movie is Dead Ringers. Released in 1988, Dead Ringers sees twins Elliot and Beverly, both played by Jeremy Irons, who run a private gynecology clinic together. One primary reason for running this clinic is not just for medical research and advancement, but rather to seduce and sleep with their patients. When the youngest twin Beverly falls in love with one of their patients, Claire, it brings catastrophic results to both of the twins. As previously hinted at with the mention of their intentions with their patients, the twins have a detached view of the human body. A cold, purely medical evaluation of the flesh, devoid of any warm or pleasurable feelings, besides that of course of the sexual acts they engage with their patients. Although they are not seeking love, their inclination for sexual acts could be a further study of the body, a more intimate examination that could not be completed within office hours. During a sexual encounter with Claire, Elliot even uses medical equipment during intercourse, corrupting an intimate act with medical proficiency and coldness. As such, the twins, primarily Elliot, have a cynical and pragmatic approach to the human body, something to be examined and studied, not to be shrouded by feelings of emotional intimacy but replaced with cold and clinical consideration. This could be seen as emblematic of the medical and scientific practice and field as a whole, but this will be discussed at a later point. As indicated, the film heavily relies on the performance and presence of Jeremy Irons as the twins, and as such, there are a variety of dynamics at play throughout the movie. Cronenberg is far more interested in the psychological aspects of his characters rather than exploitative gore. It is a heavily internalized film. Besides the gynecological practice, which is an obvious study of the body, the movie heavily relies on the internalizing of the body. For example, the film itself is heavily composed of indoor sets and locations. Most of the locations and scenes that occur are all inside. The drama and conflict is internalized within these structures, much like the struggles within the characters themselves, struggling to break free but scarcely materializing. There are roughly only 3 scenes that contain outdoor shots, 2 of which are when Beverly is inquiring about new medical equipment, and the other being at the end when Beverly attempts to say goodbye to Claire. The struggles of the spirit between Beverly and Elliot only materialise in their drug use, but are hardly spoken to each other with compassion or understanding, deemed only to be a problem to be fixed for the sake of both.
Right, I want you to take 3 of these now. Take 3 around 7 this evening. 3 before you go to sleep. And 3 when you wake up in the morning. Yes, Doctor. Now, can I trust you to do that, or have I got to sit here and watch you? I don't know.
As such, the film could be read as a philosophical struggling of the soul to break free from the body, although, in an interesting turn, this soul inhibits 2 bodies, a kindred spirit shared between 2 vessels. As one body struggles, this heavily affects the other. Seen when Beverly becomes heavily involved in drug use, Elliot soon follows. Unfortunately, by the end, when one soul dies, soon does the other, a spiritual rendition of conjoined twins, not linked by flesh, but rather by the soul. Both The Fly and Dead Ringers also examine the scientific and medical profession and the possible negatives and outcomes of its commodification, particularly the consequences of callous attitudes displayed by the main characters in their quest to advance scientific and medical practice. Although not an uncommon motif throughout Cronenberg's work, the science gone wrong aspect of both of these movies are handled in differing ways, exploring the failures and consequences in both the physical as well as mental. Firstly, let's examine The Fly and how it demonstrates possible problems associated with the commodification of science and healthcare, as well as the consequences it has for the main character. Seth Brundle is a man who wants to make a change, a paradigm change in the scientific community as well as transport, due to his invention of a teleporter. And although he is marked with eccentricities, awkwardness and particularly humour, he is still very much allured by the promise of fame and fortune that these teleporting devices may grant him. Although they are often tinged with humour and a certain awareness, lines such as these do display Seth's ultimate purpose for the development of these machines.
You'll never have to get car sick again.
Or air sick, or seasick.
I know, or tricycle sick.
Although the line is certainly tinged with humour and will assuredly help the human race with ease of travel, it does showcase Seth's initial intentions for his inventions, and that is for self-motivated purposes. Machines that will service him and alleviate his ailment of car sickness. And of course, launching him into the stratosphere of important scientists with revolutionary work. As well as his intentions, Seth, in a sense, employs Veronica to track his progress in a series of camera videos, as well as imploring her to write a book about him and his inventions, further advancing his stardom and popularity if it was to be published alongside the commercialised development of his machines. Seth is seemingly punished for his attempts to commercialise the scientific method, for attempting to translate the organic into the mechanical and for profit, and as such, he loses his humanity at its core. Even though Seth is struggling through this disastrous ailment, he still retains his humour, although the same could be said for his aspirations of fame and stardom. Seth's perhaps selfish desire to gain fame and notoriety, even as a biological and scientific anomaly, is still present at the forefront of his personality, almost as if he's trying to exploit his condition at all costs just to receive notoriety and to be remembered as something, as long as he's remembered at all. The same loss of humanity due to the commodification of healthcare can be applied to that of Dead Ringers. This is most apparent through the characters of Elliot and Beverly. Beverly and Elliot operate a privately run gynecological clinic that seemingly only caters to the elite of society, offering their services to those that are wealthy. And although they are apparently very skilled at their job, it appears that they only offer their services to this small social pool. They then receive awards from such like-minded socialites and medical professionals for their varying inventions and practices, although these inventions may not be commercialised for every woman to use, only available to the prevailing social class. This could be emblematic of the privatisation of healthcare as a whole, only offering services to those that are able to pay their way to receive them, denying all others access if they do not possess the cash or connections. Elliot and Beverly heavily take advantage of these women by inciting further intimate treatment via seduction and sexual acts. As previously mentioned, the twins, primarily Elliot, approach sex in a clinical way, devoid of any emotion and feeling. Once Beverly begins to develop feelings for Claire, it brings destruction upon the harmonious relationship of Beverly and Elliot. They completely spiral out of control once emotion and real intimacy enter their circle, primarily Beverly's life. They are resistant to the idea of a genuine human connection, closed off to any outside force that could possibly interfere with the link established between the twins. Beverly seemingly has no comprehension on how to deal with his intense emotions towards Claire, and as such lashes out at others, loses his practice, which was a lifelong obsession, and ultimately succumbs to addiction. This could be illustrated with the consequences with commodification of healthcare and the results of possibly compartmentalizing patients and removing all human emotion from the practice, reducing them to purely biological entities to be studied. To the twins, the women that come into their clinic are only to be studied and taken advantage of, never to be engaged with on an emotional and human level, which could be emblematic of the privatization of healthcare as a whole, profit and research before people.
If we didn't share women, you'd still be a virgin.
No.
You'd never get laid on your own.
Well, I don't get out much. Listen, the beauty of our business is you don't have to get out to meet beautiful women. No, I can't do that. It's not ethical. No. It's not safe.
Cronenberg perhaps being critical of such a method of practice, removing the humanity from medical treatment and replacing it with purely calculating study. The selfish pursuit of scientific and medical study being the ultimate downfall for both Seth Brundle and the twins. Although the body and its surrounding anxieties have been discussed through various methods in his work, certain works elevated Cronenberg to a new status of director thanks to their literary references as well as reformed methods of storytelling. Such films include Naked Lunch, Existenz, and 1983's Videodrome.